Spring 1929, Dearborn, Michigan. The sun rises over Fair Lane, a mansion sprawling across 1,300 acres along the Rouge River. Inside this 56-room estate, powerhouse generators hum beneath Italian marble floors. The man who revolutionized industry sleeps in a bedroom overlooking his private hydroelectric dam. Henry Ford, worth $188 billion in today's dollars, commands an empire of steel and assembly lines. But here's what the history books won't tell you. Within 3 generations, his descendants would declare bankruptcy not once, but 4 separate times. The family that invented modern manufacturing couldn't manufacture lasting wealth. How does a dynasty built on innovation collapse under the weight of its own success? Stand outside Fair Lane today, and you're confronting a paradox rendered in limestone and sandstone. The mansion doesn't scream opulence the way Vanderbilt's Biltmore does. It whispers power. Architect William Van Tyne designed it in 1915 as a prairie school masterpiece: horizontal lines, natural materials, integration with landscape. Henry Ford wanted something different from the Gilded Age palaces he despised. He got it. Walk the grounds. 1,300 acres. A private power station generating electricity from the river. Greenhouses spanning an acre. A bowling alley. An indoor swimming pool with filtration systems a decade ahead of their time. This wasn't just a home. It was a declaration. American industry didn't need European pretension. It needed American ingenuity. The construction took 3 years and cost $2 million, roughly $55 million today. But that figure deceives. Ford didn't just build a house. He engineered a self-sufficient compound with its own power grid, water treatment, and agricultural systems. The estate employed 50 full-time staff, gardeners, engineers, maids, chauffeurs, security. The monthly operational costs exceeded $50,000 in 1920s dollars. That's $800,000 per month in today's currency. Nearly $10 million per year just to keep the lights on and the gardens trimmed. Henry Ford hated waste. He pioneered efficiency. He turned manufacturing into a science of eliminating unnecessary motion. Yet here he was, maintaining an estate that consumed resources at a rate that would bankrupt most American families in a single month. But that's just the mansion. The real story isn't about Fair Lane. It's about what this place represented, a fundamental misunderstanding about the nature of industrial wealth, one that would echo through 4 generations and lead to 4 separate financial catastrophes. Because Henry Ford built an empire on efficiency, but his heirs would discover that dynasties don't run on assembly lines. How did a family synonymous with American success become a cautionary tale about generational wealth? The answer begins not with Henry, but with his vision of what his fortune could build and his fatal blindness to what it couldn't. Henry Ford didn't start wealthy. Born 1863 on a Michigan farm, he despised agriculture. Dirt under fingernails. Endless labor tied to seasons and weather. He wanted precision, control, machinery that obeyed logic, not nature's whims. By 1903, he'd founded his 3rd automotive company. The first 2 failed. The Ford Motor Company succeeded because Henry understood something his competitors didn't. The future belonged not to craftsmen building custom cars for the wealthy, but to engineers mass-producing affordable vehicles for everyone. The Model T, launched in 1908, proved him right. By 1914, Ford produced half the automobiles in America. Then came the stroke of genius that built the dynasty, the $5 workday. In January 1914, Ford announced he'd pay assembly line workers $5 daily, double the industry standard. Critics called him insane. He called it efficiency. Pay workers enough to buy the products they make, and you create both labor stability and customer base expansion. Revolutionary. The wealth came fast. By 1920, Henry Ford personally controlled assets worth over $1 billion, more than $15 billion today. Unlike Rockefeller or Carnegie, who diluted ownership through partnerships and public offerings, Ford maintained absolute control. The Ford Motor Company remained privately held, family-owned. This decision would prove both blessing and curse. Fair Lane, completed in 1915, embodied Henry's philosophy. He hired architect William Van Tyne specifically because Van Tyne understood modern systems: electrical, hydraulic, mechanical. The mansion featured innovations that wouldn't become standard for decades: a central vacuum system, humidity controls, concrete fireproof construction. The power plant alone cost $250,000, equivalent to $7 million today. It generated not just electricity but heat, using turbines driven by the Rouge River's flow. Henry wanted self-sufficiency. The estate grew its own food, maintained its own livestock, produced its own power. In his mind, Fair Lane demonstrated that wealth should create independence, not dependence on servants and suppliers. The irony escaped him. It took 50 employees to maintain this self-sufficient independence. But Henry was building more than a home. He was constructing a vision of industrial aristocracy, American style. No European titles, no inherited lands. Just capability, innovation, and ruthless efficiency, creating a new kind of dynasty. His son Edsel would inherit the business. His grandchildren would expand it. The Ford name would echo through generations. He established the Ford Foundation in 1936. Initially as an estate tax avoidance mechanism, endowing it with non-voting Ford Motor Company stock. The structure seemed brilliant: maintain family control while creating a charitable legacy. They didn't know it yet, but this decision would plant the seeds of the dynasty's first financial crisis. Henry's vision had a fatal flaw. He understood manufacturing. He understood efficiency. He understood machinery. But he didn't understand that wealth, unlike assembly lines, doesn't obey engineering principles. You can't standardize inheritance. You can't quality control ambition. And you can't mass-produce the character traits that built the fortune in the first place. By 1945, when Henry's health began failing, the empire employed 130,000 workers. Fair Lane stood as monument to industrial triumph. The Ford name meant American success. Everything looked permanent. Nothing was. Let's talk about what Fair Lane actually cost to operate, because the numbers reveal the arithmetic that would eventually strangle the dynasty. 50 full-time staff. In 1920, each earned between $1,200 and $3,000 annually, good wages, reflective of Henry's pay philosophy. That's $100,000 to $150,000 in annual payroll, or $2 million today. Add groundskeeping equipment, tools, uniforms, and worker housing, and labor costs approach $200,000, yearly $3.5 million in current dollars. The power plant. Henry's pride required constant maintenance. Turbines, generators, electrical systems, mechanical engineers on permanent payroll, fuel costs when the river ran low. Another $50,000 annually, minimum. Property taxes on 1,300 acres in suburban Detroit, $30,000 per year by the 1930s. That's $650,000 today. Then came the operational expenses rich families rarely discuss publicly: food for the household and staff, heating oil for backup systems, repairs to 56 rooms, replacement of mechanical systems, landscaping, security, insurance. Henry Ford's accountants estimated total Fair Lane operating costs at $250,000 to $300,000 annually. During the 1920s, roughly $5 million per year today. That's $416,000 monthly, $13,700 daily, just to maintain one family's residence. For Henry, this was manageable. Ford Motor Company generated tens of millions in annual profits. But here's the trap. The estate's costs were fixed. The company's profits weren't. And more crucially, Henry controlled the company directly. His heirs wouldn't. Edsel Ford, Henry's only son, lived differently. Sophisticated where Henry was provincial. Cultured where Henry was practical. Edsel built his own estate, a lakefront mansion in Grosse Pointe Shores designed by Albert Kahn. Gauckler Pointe, completed in 1929, cost $2 million, $35 million today. 60 rooms. Art Deco interiors. A household staff of 25. Now there were two massive estates draining family resources. The pattern was establishing itself. Each generation equated family status with architectural grandeur. Each built monuments to their position. None calculated the long-term burden of maintaining multiple dynastic homes while splitting inheritance among multiple heirs. Henry died in 1947. Edsel had died 4 years earlier, at just 49. Control passed to Henry Ford II, Edsel's son. Young Henry faced immediate crisis. The company had decayed during his grandfather's declining years, labor unrest, quality problems, financial losses. He had to choose, save the company or maintain the estates. Fair Lane became untenable. Operating costs had risen to $400,000 annually, $5 million today. Henry II donated it to the University of Michigan Dearborn in 1957. The family couldn't afford to keep it. This was the first crack. Behind closed doors, the arithmetic turned brutal. The 1936 Ford Foundation structure meant that 90% of Ford Motor Company stock was non-voting foundation shares. The family controlled only 10%, but that 10% was subject to inheritance taxes. When Henry Ford died, his estate owed taxes approaching $70 million, nearly $900 million today. The family didn't have liquid assets to pay it. Their wealth was locked in company stock they couldn't easily sell without losing control. They negotiated a payment plan with the IRS spanning over a decade. The dynasty's second generation was already paying for the first generation's estate planning failures. But the real costs weren't financial. They were psychological. Edsel had grown up in Fair Lane's shadow, always trying to prove himself to a father who viewed him as soft. Henry II grew up watching his father's slow defeat, absorbing the lesson that Ford men carried impossible expectations. Benson Ford, Henry II's brother, turned to alcohol. William Clay Ford, the youngest brother, watched the family dynamics and built his own emotional walls. The mansion's true cost wasn't measured in dollars. It was measured in the pressure to maintain a myth of industrial invincibility, even as the human beings inside the stone walls were cracking under the weight. By 1960, the second generation was fracturing. Fair Lane sat empty. Gauckler Pointe was sold. The estates that were supposed to anchor the dynasty for centuries had lasted barely 40 years. And then came the mistakes, 4 of them, that would turn the family name from triumph into tragedy. Start with the son who should have been safe. Benson Ford Jr., grandson of Henry, great-grandson of the founder. Born into absolute American royalty, he inherited trust funds, company stock, the Ford name. By age 30, he was bankrupt. The details are almost too painful. Benson Jr. never worked a sustained job. He dabbled in businesses, restaurants, real estate ventures that collapsed. He married and divorced repeatedly, each split draining resources. His trust fund had seemed infinite. It wasn't. When you spend $500,000 annually, but the trust generates $200,000, mathematics catches you eventually. He filed Chapter 11 in 1962. The papers reported it as financial reorganization. The family called it shame. How does a Ford go bankrupt? The same way anyone does, spending more than you earn, except with the added humiliation of doing it with a name synonymous with American wealth. Great-grandson of Henry, initiated into ISKCON, International Society for Krishna Consciousness, changed his name to Ambarisha Das. His bankruptcy came not from excess, but from mismanagement combined with expensive spiritual pursuits. Alfie inherited approximately $10 million through trust funds. He donated lavishly to East Con, built temples, funded projects. Noble causes, perhaps, but executed without financial planning. By 1989, debts exceeded assets. He filed bankruptcy in Florida, listing liabilities of $8.7 million against assets of $3.2 million. The Ford dynasty's third generation was proving a brutal economic truth. Inherited wealth without inherited capability evaporates fast. Yes, again, the first bankruptcy hadn't taught the lesson. Benson Jr. emerged from 1962's restructuring, rebuilt modestly, then repeated every mistake. More failed businesses, more divorces, more trust fund depletion. The 1996 filing was uglier than the first. By now, he was elderly, sick. The bankruptcy documents revealed a life of spectacular financial dysfunction, debts to lawyers, ex-wives, business partners. Assets nearly zero. He died in 2002. The Detroit Free Press obituary mentioned his lineage prominently, but glossed over the bankruptcies. The family still protected its mythology, even when the facts screamed otherwise. She was different. Daughter of William Clay Ford Sr., she actually worked as a substance abuse counselor, of all things. She understood dysfunction. She'd lived it. Her bankruptcy stemmed partly from economic collapse, 2008 recession, partly from expensive divorce, partly from the same pattern. Trust funds that seemed infinite, but weren't. She filed with $1.5 million in debts, including substantial credit card balances and legal fees. The poetic cruelty. A Ford declaring bankruptcy the same year Ford Motor Company itself nearly collapsed, saved only by refusing federal bailout money that General Motors and Chrysler took. The company survived. The dynasty kept fracturing. But why? 4 separate family members, across 3 generations, all ending in bankruptcy courts. This wasn't coincidence. This was pattern, trust fund delusion. Each heir assumed the money was infinite. None understood that trusts are contracts with end dates and withdrawal limits. They spent principal like interest. Identity burden. Being a Ford meant expectations without training. They were supposed to embody success, but received no education in maintaining wealth. The family assumed bloodline conferred capability. It didn't. Company distance. After Henry II, fewer family members worked at Ford Motor Company. They received dividends but didn't build businesses. Consumption without creation became the pattern. Estate planning failures. Henry Ford's 1936 foundation structure locked wealth in tax-efficient but illiquid forms. Heirs got trusts, not cash. When they needed liquidity, they borrowed against trusts, creating debt spirals. Psychological damage. The pressure of the name broke people. Benson Jr.'s alcoholism. Alfie's spiritual escape. Alina's therapeutic career choice. These weren't random. These were responses to impossible expectations. By 2010, the dynasty's financial story was clear. 1 generation of extraordinary wealth creation, followed by 3 generations of steady dissolution. Fair Lane sat as a university museum, preserved not by family, but by institutional adoption. The grand estates were gone. The bankruptcies were public record. The arithmetic had turned out exactly as brutal as the hidden costs predicted. Today, you can visit Fair Lane. It's open for tours. $20 per adult. You walk through rooms where Henry Ford once entertained Thomas Edison and Harvey Firestone. You see the bowling alley, the swimming pool, the power plant. Everything is preserved, maintained by University of Michigan Dearborn, with grants and admission fees. The tour guides tell stories of innovation and friendship. They mention Henry's $5 workday, his Model T, his impact on American manufacturing. They show you the beautiful details, Italian marble, intricate woodwork, engineering marvels. They don't talk about the bankruptcies. That's not in the official narrative. The Ford family still wields influence. William Clay Ford Jr., serves as executive chairman of Ford Motor Company. The foundation endures as one of America's wealthiest philanthropic institutions, with assets exceeding $16 billion. The company employs 177,000 people worldwide. But peel back the Dynasty's veneer, and you find a haunting truth about American wealth. Creation and preservation require utterly different skills. Henry Ford mastered creation. He understood production, innovation, efficiency. He built an empire from mechanical genius and ruthless focus. He didn't understand that wealth, once created, becomes a living thing that must be fed, managed, understood. You can't manufacture financial discipline on an assembly line. You can't standardize wisdom across generations. You can't quality control character. The bankruptcies weren't aberrations, they were inevitable. Consider the arithmetic. Henry Ford died worth perhaps $200 billion in today's dollars. That wealth divided among children, then grandchildren, then great-grandchildren. Each generation multiplied heirs while wealth grew more slowly than division. Add operating costs of estates, lifestyle expenses, divorces, failed businesses, and poor estate planning. The math always pointed toward eventual depletion. But there's a deeper lesson here, one that transcends the Ford name. American culture celebrates wealth creation as the ultimate achievement. We study how fortunes are made. We mythologize the Carnegies, Rockefellers, and Fords. We teach business classes on their strategies. We barely whisper about how fortunes die. 90% of family wealth disappears by the third generation. The Ford dynasty actually beat the average. They made it to the fourth generation before the bankruptcies accumulated. But the pattern held, shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations, as the saying goes. The irony cuts deep. Henry Ford spent his life fighting entropy in manufacturing, eliminating waste, maximizing efficiency, perfecting processes. But entropy won anyway, just in his descendants rather than his products. The Model T stopped production in 1927 after 15 million units. Fairlane lasted as a family home barely 30 years. The dynasty fractured in 3 generations. What remains? A museum. A company that survived by becoming public and professional rather than dynastic. A foundation doing genuinely good work. And a name that still means something, even if what it means has changed. The 4 bankruptcies aren't the whole story. Plenty of Ford descendants live quietly, comfortably, without financial drama. But those 4 failures reveal truth that success stories obscure. Wealth is not an object you inherit like a watch. It's a responsibility you either master or don't. It's a skill set, a discipline, a psychological burden that breaks as many people as it elevates. Walk through Fairlane today on an autumn afternoon. Sun slanting through leaded glass windows. Leaves drifting onto manicured lawns maintained by university grounds crews. The house is beautiful. The history is fascinating. But listen carefully. Beneath the tour guide's practice narrative, you could almost hear the echo of Henry Ford's original miscalculation. The belief that building an empire meant leaving a dynasty. He understood steel and assembly lines. He never understood that the most valuable machines don't pass through bloodlines. They have to be rebuilt in different forms, by each generation willing to do the work. The Ford name endures. The industrial dynasty died 4 bankruptcies ago. And Fairlane stands as monument to both what was achieved and what couldn't be sustained, a palace of American ingenuity, maintained now not by inheritors, but by strangers who bought tickets to glimpse what wealth, at its peak, looked like just before the arithmetic caught up.